I'm Nancy Cordes at the United Center in Chicago, and welcome to a special Democratic National Convention edition of America Decides. Here in Chicago, delegates are gearing up for night 2 of the Democratic National Convention, while Vice President Kamala Harris is breaking away from the convention for the day for her first campaign rally in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, with her running mate, Governor Tim Walz. Here at the United Center, we've been getting something of a concert this afternoon. Sound checks by Common, by Patti LaBelle. And so it's been fun to watch, and we'll see them for real this evening. Here at the United Center, former President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama are set to speak tonight as well. Let's bring in Robert Costa and Ed O'Keefe to discuss what we can expect. Robert is here with me. Ed, of course, down on his in his traditional position on the floor. Ed, set the stage for us. Tell us what we're expecting to hear and who we're expecting to hear from tonight.
Nancy, as they work their way through the anthem here, we're going to hear, let's go backwards. And we'll start with the former president, Barack Obama, his wife, the former First Lady, Michelle Obama, so two very famous Windy City residents. We'll also hear from Doug Emhoff, the second gentleman of the United States, angling, I suppose, to be first gentleman of the United States. Watch his speech tonight, because not only a chance for him to talk about his wife, with whom he celebrates his 10th wedding anniversary on the night that she accepts the nomination, Thursday, but also there's been some suggestion that he might focus a bit on the work he's done, especially in the last 9 months or so, concerning anti-Semitism, the scourge of it in this country and around the world. Remember, he's visited concentration camps in Europe. He's met with the families of Israeli hostages, American hostages, and has spoken out frequently about anti-Jewish sentiments and attacks in this country and around the world. Be curious if he brings that up at all tonight, and if we hear, and we will see his son Cole introduce him as well. After that, it's Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Senator Bernie Sanders, who has an opportunity as the top progressive in this party, really the progressive spirit animal, even though he is an independent, to validate Harris to those that maybe believe she's not liberal enough, and to speak more broadly about the concerns that progressives like him have. And then we'll hear from a handful of others. And we're expecting, for example, tonight, even more Republicans, either who worked for or once supported former President Donald Trump, to be here to speak on why they now believe Harris is the country's only option.
Right, that'll be interesting tonight to hear from several Republicans, even some who worked for former President Trump. Bob, last night we heard briefly from the nominee herself, Kamala Harris. She made a surprise appearance. Let's take a listen to a little bit of what she had to say and then talk about it.
This November, we will come together and declare with one voice, as one people, we are moving forward.
Moving forward, not back. That's a big theme of the next 4 days. Bob, how is the campaign feeling about her performance and how things are going so far in general?
There's an optimism behind the scenes among Harris advisors that they got through what they saw was perhaps the toughest night. It was a balancing act for the Harris campaign to open her convention while paying respect to President Joe Biden, a very personal moment for the president and his family. Now, after getting through Monday and the emotion of what it's like to see the sitting president, the former nominee, a presumptive nominee, wiping a tear from his face, listening to his family, now it turns to the politics. As Ed said, some Republicans are going to be speaking. Can she broaden the coalition? Can she reach out to centrist voters, Republican voters, who might not love former President Donald Trump? Can she make an overture to them? The Harris advisors tell me that she's known, she's vice president of the United States, but at the same time, she's not easily defined in the eyes of many voters. She doesn't have a hardened persona when you look at polling. People don't immediately come to a conclusion when they hear her name about what she represents politically. And for Democrats, that presents an opportunity for her with this convention, especially with her speech on Thursday night, to introduce herself to the country on her own terms.
And because she isn't as well known, Ed, the president himself had an opportunity last night to help the public know her a little bit better. Let's listen a little bit to what he had to say about his vice president.
Her story represents the best American story. And like many of our best presidents, she was also vice president. That's a joke.
So, Ed, lots of support and praise from the president for Kamala Harris. He spoke for nearly an hour, but she's been by his side for 4 years now, and we really didn't get many specifics, any kinds of personal stories that the president has that would either help us know her better or would help the public understand her strengths and what she's about.
No, I thought that was a real lost opportunity, Nancy, and an otherwise pretty laudatory and sort of good summary of what the president has done and believes his legacy to be. Right after that quip, it could have been very simple. You know, give us one or two examples, vivid ones in his mind, of how she's been in the room for key decisions or when she has weighed in and tweaked his thinking on something or his final decision, and we didn't get it. And these are questions, by the way, that he's been asked repeatedly, especially in the last year and a half. What is it about her specifically that you believe makes her qualified? And he just goes, well, she's, you know, smart. She's been there. She understands the issues. Of course, she's ready to go. But he's never provided specifics. That's maybe just not in his nature. Doesn't necessarily feel the need to do it because in his view, because I picked her and because she's worked with me, she's qualified. But you're right. It would have been a good opportunity for him perhaps to lay out something, either in the domestic or even more perhaps critically the foreign space, to say, this is where she has been helpful. And we know, for example, Nancy, in the last few weeks, especially since the hostages were released in Russia, that the White House has gone out of its way to call out a few times when she was the key interlocutor between the U.S. and European leaders at the president's request. A meeting with the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, for example. A few other conversations she had on the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference earlier this year. But why not use this platform when tens of millions of Americans are watching either live or watching it the next day to perhaps call out some of that and assuage the concerns of those that might think she's still not ready?
Yeah. Bob, Republicans are watching this convention very closely, just as Democrats were watching the Republican convention a month ago. What do they make of what they're seeing so far?
It's almost like they're watching a battle unfold or their enemy get ready for the battle in the fall, and they're just in a low-key mode right now. Former President Trump is telling his advisors privately that once this Democratic convention is over, he expects her to get a bump in the polls. He expects Democrats to emerge united, though you never know. That's his expectation, I'm told. But he's going to start a barrage of attacks, and we saw a lot of it already in his conversation with our colleague Caitlin Huey-Burns. She had a great interview with Trump that was revealing about his state of mind. It was a prism about where that Trump campaign's at. He is going to attack her in personal ways, scathing ways.
Yeah.
And that is what she's going to have to deal with. This reminds me a lot of 2016. Secretary Clinton in her campaign, they didn't want to kind of wade into that rhetorical swamp and get into a messy political fight with Trump. But Trump will force you to do it.
Right. It's a challenge no matter which way you go. Bob Costa, thanks so much. Ed O'Keefe on the floor, thank you so much. We'll be coming back to you in the next hour or two. Appreciate it. And my colleague Weijia Jiang joins us now from Milwaukee, where Harris is speaking tonight alongside her running mate. You are just down about an hour, Weijia, down the road from us. So why did Harris and Walz decide to hold a rally during the Democratic convention?
Well, Nancy, the one thing that Vice President Harris has had going for her since she became the nominee, even before when we knew that Joe Biden was going to step down, was energy and momentum and excitement. And so they are trying to keep that going, not just in Chicago, but in a critical battleground state, Nancy, Wisconsin, which actually is where she kicked off her campaign as a presidential nominee. It was her first event just about 4 weeks ago. And so they expect that this venue will be packed and that they'll be able to deliver a message that not only resonates here, but also with folks at the DNC. And so you have to remember, she is running on a very truncated timeline for president. She hasn't had the opportunity to reach out to voters, to have these big events like a traditional candidate would. So they have a lot of ground to make up. And that is why that even though it is in the middle of the DNC convention, she is still going to be out here campaigning, Nancy.
Yeah, that's such a good point. You know, we heard from Hillary Clinton last night, Weija. She was urging Democrats not to get complacent, even if Harris is moving up in the polls right now. Case in point, Hillary Clinton herself didn't visit Wisconsin at all in 2016. She thought wrongly that she had that state in the bag. It turned out that she narrowly lost. So Kamala Harris, on the other hand, is making her third trip to Wisconsin just in the past month since she became the nominee. What should we make of that?
I think you are absolutely right, Nancy, that she is learning from lessons from 2016. Because as you mentioned, you know, Hillary Clinton was coming off of 2 firm wins by former President Barack Obama. Wisconsin is historically part of that Democratic blue wall that really was a stunner when former President Trump won in 2016. And, you know, the vice president will tell you, she'll be the first one to say that she is not taking anything for granted. And she believes she is an underdog. At least that is how she is viewing her entire race right now. Even though the polls show that nationally she has an edge over Trump, even though they show that she is closing the gap on Donald Trump in these critical battleground states, she keeps saying that, you know, we are still behind. We are the ones that have to pull ahead in front of Trump. And that's why at every moment that she can, she wants to connect with people, especially here in Wisconsin.
Weija Zhang in Milwaukee. Fun fact, at the same arena where Republicans held their convention just a month ago. Thanks, Weija. We'll talk to you soon. While Democrats are gathered here in Chicago, Donald Trump is in the battleground state of Michigan. We're on the campaign trail with the former president. Plus, from Michigan to Pennsylvania, the Harris Walls Battleground State Director joins us for the latest on how the campaign map is shifting. You're streaming America Decides. Stick around.
I love the job, but I love my country more. And all this talk about how I'm angry at all those people who said I should step down, that's not true.
As Democrats celebrate their nominee in Chicago, former President Donald Trump is campaigning across the lake in Michigan. He spoke earlier today about crime at a local sheriff's office.
We're going to stop violent crime in the United States, and it's people like this that can do the job better than anybody. They do the job justly.
Caitlin Huey-Burns is following Trump on the campaign trail. Caitlin, we saw there a slightly more subdued former President Trump than we're used to seeing. Talk about his demeanor today and why he's campaigning in Howell, Michigan, this small town, just 10,000 people.
Yeah, Nancy, good to see you. You're exactly right. This was a very different kind of presentation from Donald Trump, and that's by design. The campaign has had him speak to smaller crowds, smaller venues, and trying to focus on a particular issue each day. So yesterday he visited a manufacturing plant to talk about the economy. Today he visited a local sheriff's office here to talk about crime, and he was flanked by local law enforcement and, you know, essentially read from a script, veered off it a couple of times, especially to criticize Kamala Harris or to criticize Joe Biden, who he is still talking about on the campaign trail. But these past couple events in these key battleground states have not been focused on big rallies and trying to gin up support. They've been trying to keep the candidate on message. You mentioned Howell. This is an important location because just a month ago, there was a white supremacist rally here. Decades ago, a leader of the KKK lived here, and this area was kind of known for that. It has since tried to kind of scrub that history. Former President Trump was actually asked by a Fox News reporter about why he was visiting here, given those protests earlier, about a month ago, and he said, who was president then? The reporter said Joe Biden, and he said exactly. So trying to kind of pin this back, Joe Biden did visit the state in 2021, visit this area in 2021. But Nancy, as you know, Michigan is such a key battleground state. Our polling shows essentially a dead heat here. And Donald Trump is hoping, this is part of the blue wall, a place that he, really needs to win in order to win back the White House.
Yeah, no question. Caitlin, your interview with President Trump yesterday generated so much news, and you asked him if he would release his medical records. He said he would. This is a man who's almost 80 years old. Has the campaign said where and when they will make good on that promise?
Not yet, Nancy, and it's important to note that because this is something that we have to keep pressing for, because he said he would not only release those medical records, but would also take a cognitive test. And he said that any candidate running for president should take a cognitive test. That reminded me of that pitch from Nikki Haley, who had urged both Trump and Biden to take one. What is, significant about all of that, Nancy, is that Donald Trump now is the oldest candidate in the race. You know so well from covering Biden, that was the biggest, liability for him. And so now there are these questions being posed to Donald Trump. And so the question of releasing those health records becomes important. If he were elected to the White House, he would leave office older than Joe Biden is. So those questions remain, and we will continue to press.
Caitlin Huey-Burns with an interview that is still generating headlines today. Thank you so much. Kamala Harris made an unexpected appearance on day one of the party convention, praising President Biden in brief remarks and predicting party unity in November. Dan Cannon is one of the many people working to achieve that goal. He is the Battleground State Director for the Harris-Walz campaign, and he joins me now. Dan, thanks so much for being with us. So let me start out by asking you about the campaign map. Obviously, things have shifted significantly over the past month. Our polling was showing that Joe Biden was trailing in most of the battleground states. Now it appears that Kamala Harris has essentially pulled even possibly ahead in some of those states. Are there states that you now believe are winnable that seemed to be out of reach before?
Well, Nancy, first of all, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me. I think that the states you mentioned, the Michigan in particular, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, but also those Sunbelt states of Arizona and Nevada and Georgia, North Carolina, I've always felt those would be close states. They've been close in 2018, close in 2020. Close in 2022, and there's just some political gravity in this country that brings things back to a very tight electorate there. We've been planning since the beginning to have operations in those states that could win a close election, designed, in fact, to win a close election. More than 300 staff, 300 offices, 1,600 staff in those places. And I think it's true that the enthusiasm for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz is palpable. It's real. It's giving us quite a lot to work with. But the trick is to take that enthusiasm and channel it into action on the ground. And those offices and staff and thousands of volunteers are doing just that. We had more than 1 million voter contact attempts just this week with our convention lead up, and 2,800 events in the battleground states in the weekend leading up to the convention. So our challenge is to take the enthusiasm and drive it. But I think all those states have been toss-ups. They will be toss-ups. They're going to be close elections, and we're operating from that vantage point.
Okay, well, Dan, one of your colleagues at the campaign, David Plouffe, was sounding pretty optimistic today in an interview with Axios. He said that he believes the Sun Belt is now in play again. That means North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada. But he said it's going to be really close. It could come down to 1 or 2 votes per precinct. That's putting a lot of pressure on you, Dan, since you are the Battleground State Director. Do you share his optimism?
Well, I do. I think David's right, and he's one of the smartest operators you're going to find on this stuff. He knows very well what it takes to win tight battleground races. I think we're strengthened for sure in the Sun Belt, and strengthened in the Blue Wall as well, I should say. But to my point, and I think to what David would have said, you just have to expect a close race in those places. I mean, Georgia was 11,000 votes separating the candidates in 2020. Less than a quarter percentage point, also in Arizona, less than a point in most of these states, actually. And so the imperative of having an organization that can cut through, register voters, persuade them, cure ballots, and be a permission structure presence on the ground to bring more people into your campaign, that's what's required to win those close races. And a point I want to make, Nancy, is the Trump campaign, I do not think, shares this vision. They don't have anything like the infrastructure. In Nevada, we've got 12 offices to their 1. In Pennsylvania, 36 offices to their 3. In Georgia, 24 offices, and they just opened their first last month. I don't think they respect the need to have a relationship with voters and to do those things. We feel like that's an imperative, and it's a design we have to win a close race. Pluff is right. I think the Sun Belt's very much in play, and I feel very confident about that, but it's only going to happen with an intentional campaign that engages people. We are doing that, and the Trump campaign is simply not.
One of the suggestions we hear that you're getting a lot from Democrats of all stripes is, hey, send the coach out to Friday night football games. Send Governor Tim Walz to a high school football game every Friday night in a battleground state between now and November 5th. Are you planning to take that advice?
Well, look, I think Coach Walz is a tremendous leader. I think the fact that he has been a coach, which means a teacher, it means a mentor, it means someone connected to people in their lives and helping them work through things and improve their lives, is such a great encapsulation of how I think he and the vice president look at the imperative of politics. And so I think anything that does that strikes at that feeling is something we want to do. And it's in stark contrast to what you see from J.D. Vance and from Donald Trump, who not only, I don't think, share that need to empathize with people and connect with them, but then simply have this blinder on what people actually care about. I mean, Trump today was talking again about how he has no regrets about his actions on Roe. He refused to condemn KKK marchers in Michigan, where he was, as you pointed out. I think people want a leadership ticket that is empathetic, that is normal, that works with them on the things in their daily lives that make them better. And that's a broad approach to politics that I think is wonderful, and I think a really great tonic for what we see from Donald Trump and J.D. Vance.
Well, Dan Cannonen, you've got one of the most stressful jobs in politics, Battleground State Director for a major campaign in an election year. Thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Nancy.
And coming up, Geraldine Ferraro tried to break a political glass ceiling in '84, and so did Hillary Clinton in 2016. What does that ceiling look like today? Our political panel is going to weigh in next. You're streaming America Decides from the Democratic National Convention. Stick around.
Donald Trump fell asleep at his own trial. And when he woke up, he made his own kind of history. The first person to run for president with 34 felony convictions.
America is the land where dreams can come true for all of us.
That was Geraldine Ferraro back in 1984 addressing the Democratic National Convention as the vice presidential candidate and the first woman ever on a major party ticket for the White House. 40 years on, and Democrats led by Kamala Harris are once again eyeing that hard glass ceiling, something Hillary Clinton referred to last night.
Together, we put a lot of cracks in the highest, hardest glass ceiling. And tonight, so close to breaking through once and for all.
Let's bring in our political panel to discuss. Jaime Moore and Maura Gillespie. Jaime previously served as director to the Office of Democratic National Committee Chairman Jamie Harrison, and Maura served as an advisor to former Speaker John Boehner and Congressman Adam Kinzinger. Welcome to you both. Jaime, I want to speak to you first because you actually worked for the Clinton campaign, and I'm wondering what it was like for you listening to that speech last night, listening to her talk about the glass ceiling, just as she did in 2016. I actually saw a lot of women in particular teary-eyed in the crowd last night.
Yeah, it was sort of bittersweet. You know, you think about this, if Hillary had won in 2016, she would be the outgoing president right now. And so it was really bittersweet, but she was fantastic. Some people said this was like the Beijing speech, but on steroids, and maybe more important. So Hillary Clinton laid out the foundation for Kamala Harris, for many women who are running right now, as she mentioned. And so for us to listen to that speech last night as staff, we were just so proud of her that she can step back into the arena and support Kamala Harris so full-throatedly.
Yeah, and it was definitely a different tone than we've heard from her in the past. That was really interesting.
Right,
Maura, we're going to hear from a number of Republicans tonight and all week, in fact, including your former boss, Adam Kinzinger, but we're also going to be hearing from Stephanie Grisham. She is the former press secretary for former President Trump. Do you think that having Republicans here on the stage at the Democratic National Convention, which is kind of a novelty, do you think that that actually moves the needle for moderates or disaffected Republicans?
I think it certainly sends a message and allows people who are on the fence about who they really want to support in this election at the top of the ticket to look and see what others are doing who have expressed their concerns or who have expressed, a dissatisfaction with both those choices. I think that for Adam Kinzinger, an opportunity for him to be on the stage on Thursday is a huge opportunity for him. And will it move people to, the Kamala Harris, Tim Walz ticket? I don't know, but it might. And I think if they can focus on the issues and the fact that our democracy is at stake, that's really where I think they can win people over. Things like women's issues, things like women's health. They can pull people back to their side and make them realize that they won't lose their Republican status by this one election, but that down ballot, they can still vote Republican, but maybe at the top of the ticket, kind of, explain to them what's at stake here. That's an opportunity where I think they should really be honing in on that issue.
Yeah, so sort of a reminder of some of the fracturing within the Republican Party. Haima, tonight is also about the Obamas.
Yeah.
Former President Obama is speaking. Former First Lady Michelle Obama is speaking as well. He, of course, broke his own glass ceiling. First president of color. What do you think we're going to hear from him tonight?
I mean, this is so exciting. You think about this, Nancy. 20 years ago to this day, he spoke to the Democratic National Convention for the first time, and he started his career. He launched his career. And so we're very excited about that. But a couple of things. I think Barack Obama is going to be a validator. He's done that for multiple candidates. He did it for Joe Biden in 2020. He's going to do it for Kamala Harris tonight. Talk about the economy. He's one of the presidents that understands when he became president in 2008, the economy was completely going to the ground. And so he understands how to bring the economy back. He understands coalition building. He understands the reality of the historic aspect of this. And so Barack Obama brings a lot of different things to the table tonight. And I think obviously he's going to be fired up and ready to go. But I think he really, really enjoys his friendship with Kamala Harris. And he understands that she's going to break this glass ceiling. And he needs to be there and help her.
And do you think he is going to be there and help her? Because we don't hear from him that much publicly these days. How vigorously do you think he's going to campaign for her?
I mean, he's our biggest commodity in the Democratic Party, so you don't want to overuse him. You're going to have a lot of different governors and senators and Barack Obama and Joe Biden and Michelle Obama and other people out there, and so you don't want to oversaturate the market with Barack Obama. But he's committed, and he said this to the vice president, he's very committed to being out there and bringing that coalition back together.
Maura, I want to ask you about something that RFK Jr.'s running mate, Nicole Shanahan, had to say in a podcast today. They're running as independent candidates, but she said that they're considering dropping out and joining forces with Donald Trump. What do you think that would mean for the race, and who do you think it would benefit?
It's not surprising. I think that this campaign he hasn't done an event in over a month, and so I think this campaign is coming to an end. But we've seen it in the polls. Since Kamala Harris has joined at the top of the ticket, the polls have showed us that RFK Jr. is taking points away from Donald Trump. So it makes sense to me that they would join his ticket. I think RFK Jr. is just looking for a cabinet spot at this point. He's looking for a position, and he thinks that he has a better chance at the Trump team than he does the Democratic ticket. So, and he has expressed, frustration with the DNC for more or less, in his opinion, blocking his ticket from being part of anything, especially in New York and different lawsuits. So I do see him playing whatever card he has left. And I think, unfortunately, for the Republican Party, again, this top of the ticket issue for us as a party is really where it comes to, because down ballot, Republicans in the House and the Senate should really be messaging on their role in the economy, their role in safety and security. And I know that's hard for a lot of members to do, but they really do need to distance themselves from Trump and focus on the issues. If he's refusing to do so, they need to be on message.
Yeah, and RFK Jr. may seem like a minor storyline, but as we've seen in 2016 in particular with Hillary Clinton, any candidate that gets even a few percentage points can be a threat. Jaime Moore, Maura Gillespie, thank you both so much for the insight. I really appreciate it. The Harris campaign attacks former President Trump, not about what he said today, but where he said it. Congressman Byron Donalds will weigh in on the speech in a town where racists recently rallied. We'll explain. You're streaming America Decides. We'll be right back.
J.D. Vance, do you understand why there was a sudden job opening for running mate on the GOP ticket? They tried to kill your predecessor.
We know that Donald Trump would sell this country for $1 if it meant lining his own pockets and greasing the palms of his Wall Street friends.
That was Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez last night. She was one of many speakers who attacked Donald Trump on night one of the Democratic National Convention. Florida Republican Congressman Byron Donalds is a close ally of Donald Trump. He's here in Chicago, and he joins us now. Welcome, Congressman. Former President Trump, while all this is going on in Chicago, held a rally today in the small Michigan town of Howell, which has a documented history of KKK activity. There was a white supremacist march there just a few weeks ago. Is that why he chose to do an event in that small town?
Absolutely not. The entire line of questioning really is offensive. There are people in Howell, Michigan, just like there are people all over the entire country. My brother-in-law actually lives in Howell, Michigan. He's not a member of the KKK. He's not a neo-Nazi. He's an American working hard every single day trying to figure out what his future is going to be like. So President Trump has taken his message everywhere in the United States. Why? Because his goal is simple: to make America great again. It's not just a slogan, it is what he truly believes. And so to bring this stuff up, Joe Biden's been to Howell, Michigan. I don't even know why this is a question, except for the fact that the Democrat Party, the DNC, and Kamala Harris do not have an agenda to run on. Last night at their convention, all they could do was talk about Donald Trump because they don't have a vision for the country. So this is once again another phony story that does not matter. He went to speak to the good people of Howell, Michigan. There are great people in our country. They're in every city. They're in every state. Donald Trump's message is for everybody.
You are absolutely right that a lot of people there have most people there have absolutely nothing to do with white supremacists. But the former president could have easily taken the opportunity to denounce white supremacists today. He did not. He walked away essentially when he was asked about them. Do you wish he had taken that opportunity?
Actually, I saw a clip of what he said when he was asked about this. And what he said was, well, Joe Biden has been here too. So what are we talking about? I think at this point, Donald Trump's been in the political eye for a little over 9 years now. And I'm not going to speak for him, but I would just imagine he's sick and tired of being asked the same old question over and over again. I don't know how many times he has denounced white supremacy, he has denounced the KKK, he's denounced neo-Nazis, but those are the things that are not the issues facing the American people. What is facing the American people is a crushing inflation brought to us by Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. She was the deciding vote that created that inflation. What the American people are talking about is a wide open southern border created by Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. More than 10 million illegal immigrants in our country, taking away vital services from men and women who are in our country, who are citizens of our country. They're white, they're black, they're Hispanic, and people are furious about that. What the American people are talking about is what is America standing on the world stage today when there are global conflicts that have all bubbled up under the presidency and vice presidency of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. The American people want answers to those questions. And so Kamala Harris won't answer those questions because she has no solutions, because she's a part of the problem. She's a part of the Biden-Harris problem that has brought America to the exact same point it is at right now.
Congressman, I want to ask you about something that former President Trump told our Caitlin Huey Burns yesterday. She asked him about all the Republicans who, like you, say the focus should be on the issues. And many of these Republicans are calling on him to stop the personal attacks on Kamala Harris, particularly his comments about her appearance and her intelligence. And he said, quote, "I don't think she's a very bright person. I don't think she's very smart. So I don't consider that an insult. That's just a fact." This is a woman who was elected Attorney General of the largest state in the country. She was elected to the Senate. Do you agree with former President Trump that she's just not smart?
Listen, what I agree with President Trump on is that she has a dangerously liberal record in her time as Attorney General, in her time in the U.S. Senate, and in her time as Vice President of the United States. I would ask you, and I would ask your viewers, what is the policy position that Kamala Harris has put forward that has been to the benefit of the American people? I would argue there are none. When she came out with her first two policy proposals about what she was going to do with our economy, the first one focused around price controls. Well, guess what? Price controls have never worked in any economy, in any country in the history of the planet Earth. Richard Nixon actually tried price controls in the early 70s. It did not work for the people of our country. So Kamala Harris doesn't have a vision or a set of policies to lead our country going forward. If you were going to ask me, do I think she has the competency to lead the country going forward? I don't think she does, because competency is based upon your decision making and the policies you support. And if you examine her policies and the way she's executed them, that has been to the detriment of the people that she was charged to serve. If you don't believe me, look at the state of California. California is the #1 state in the country where people are fleeing. They are depopulating more than any other state in the country. If your policy prescriptions were good for the people of California, not only would they not be leaving, you would have more Americans going to California. The exact opposite has occurred. So I don't believe she has the skill set or the competence to lead our country going forward. That's why Donald Trump's going to be the next president of the United States.
Florida Congressman Byron Donalds, Republican, who's here in Chicago. Thank you so much. Hollywood blows into the Windy City as celebrities line up behind the Democratic ticket. Coming up next, actor and singer Billy Porter is going to join America Decides to tell us why he's backing Kamala Harris. You'll want to stick around for that. We'll be right back.
America, looking at the two choices before you, who would you hire? Kamala Harris has a resume. Donald Trump has a rap sheet.
That is the one and only Billy Porter performing Buffalo Springfield's For What It's Worth at the 2020 Democratic National Convention. You'll recall that due to the COVID-19 pandemic, that event was virtual. So everybody had to innovate. I'm joined now in person by the Tony, Grammy, and Emmy Award winner himself, Billy Porter. Thank you so much for being here, and I bet you're happy to be in person this time around.
I'm thrilled to be in person. This is my first time actually in person, and I get to be among all of the energy and the joy, you know, of this ticket. I'm thrilled.
Are we going to see you up on that stage?
Not this time, but I will be on the floor tonight.
And what brings you here? What do you want to hear? Who do you want to talk to?
You know, I am a human being whose rights have been up for legislation since the moment I could comprehend thought, every single day of my life. And it's time for that to change. And it's time for that to change for good. And I am excited to hear about the Harrison Walz ticket being for the people, for all of us. It's very important that we move forward and not go back. And we know the difference this time around. It's very stark, and it's really, you know, there's no question about it. You know, it's black and white. It's male and female. it's prosecutor versus felon. That's it. It's democracy or not. That's where we are. And I'm confident that we're going to get over this threshold, finally.
You have been very vocal, speaking out against anti-trans legislation, anti-drag legislation. The Republican presidential nominee has been saying that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are heavy into transgender, whatever that means. He's also been calling Tim Walz Tampon Tim, or his campaign has at least, because he signed a bill that provides period products in school bathrooms, all school bathrooms, boys' bathrooms, girls' bathrooms, unisex. What do you think about that kind of language, and how does it affect people in your community?
You know, it's exhausting. It's gross. And it's not working anymore. And the only reason why it does work at all is because we continue to give it oxygen. It's time for us to cut that off.
He's the presidential nominee. How do you cut it off?
You cut it off, right? You say, this is ridiculous, we're no longer covering that. It doesn't make sense. We continue to give the ridiculous oxygen. What I love about what is happening right now is that the response is exactly right from our ticket. If you don't like trans people, mind your damn business. Somebody finally said it, right? We're in America. We can be different. We can agree to disagree. That's what makes democracy work. Mind your business.
So you're happy with the messaging, and you're happy with the platform that you're hearing from this Democratic ticket.
I love it, finally.
Do you think they need to go farther?
I mean, personally, they could go further, but I also know that it's politics, and so, you know, the messaging has to stay within the political confines. But I will say, Ms. Harris is letting the children have it, and I love it.
Before we let you go, speaking of Ms. Harris, you are famous not just for your performing, but for your style and the messages that you send with your style. So I want to ask you about Kamala Harris's style last night and the tan suit that everyone is talking about on night one. There are articles about what she was trying to say with the tan suit. What do you think?
Well, we know what she was trying to say. You know, former President Obama got dragged because he wore a tan suit. She wore the tan suit.
She sure did.
Right.
Billy Porter, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Lots of fun to talk to you.
Thanks for having me.
And that does it for now. As we've been reporting, former President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama are expected to speak tonight and back Vice President Harris's campaign for the White House. We're also watching Milwaukee, where Harris and her running mate, Tim Walz, will hold their first campaign rally in that city tonight. CBS News special coverage of the Democratic National Convention will continue all evening long. I'll be back at 7 p.m. Eastern, but for now, the Daily Report with John Dickerson is next. See you soon.